Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. The Giants have joint practices on Monday and Tuesday with the Detroit Lions, and both yours truly and Nick Falato of Big Blue View will be out at Quest Diagnostics Training Center to give you everything going on during those two workouts, and thought we'd have Nick on today to chat about those practices and what we've seen so far in camp. So, and welcome Nick Falato into the show. Nick, thank you so much for a few minutes today.
Ed, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to these joint practices. Lions, they're a rugged team. See if the Giants can hold up in the trenches with a team like this.
Yeah, it'll be really, really interesting to see what the Giants look like when they're not looking across the line of scrimmage at their own teammates, and when they're looking at a good football team, to be honest with you.
A well-coached football team.
Yeah, Dan Campbell, a guy that Giants fans know well, and let's just hope that Dan Campbell's guys don't go after any kneecaps the next couple days.
Yeah, I know. They're appetizing kneecaps out there in East Rutherford.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, let's start there. I mean, what are you most looking forward to seeing? Just in terms of matchups, or in terms of offensive, defensive sort of productivity over the next couple days.
I first want to analyze and break down the matchup between the Giants pass rush, the Giants defensive line, and just the overall nature of Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson's offensive line unit. You have one of the best offensive lines in the entire National Football League over there. They replaced Jonah Jackson, who went out west and signed with the team, with Kevin Zeitler. New York Giant fans know Kevin Zeitler very well, and he's still playing at a high level. Penei Sewell, Frank Ragnow is one of the best centers. They still have Taylor Decker and Graham Glasgow. So I want to see Dexter Lawrence. I want to see Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, Nacho, even players like Ryder Anderson against, if he gets worked into that rotation as well, like he's been throughout camp, against that unit in the run game, because they can really run the football, as we found out last year with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, but also, especially, pass rushing. Can they get after Jared Goff? Can they get after the Lions quarterback? So that's probably the number one thing I'm going to pay attention to. I have high hopes for the New York Giants defensive line. I think they will be able to get their some reps against this unit. But then I'm also going to see who's going to cover Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's going to be operating out of the slot. I really want to know who's going to handle that responsibility. We've heard Isaiah Simmons is going to be used in that manner. It looks like Drew Phillips has been worked into that first team, along with Nick McLeod a little bit. How are they going to hold up the secondary against Amon-Ra St. Brown if or when it's not Deonte Banks covering him?
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Nick.
You're all good, Ed. You're all good. So those are the two defensive matchups. Those are the two defensive matchups I'm really honing in on.
Mm-hmm. Let's stop and talk about the Giants defensive line for a minute. Just so happens we're recording on Sunday, and this morning at Big Blue View, I did a sort of in-depth piece on the Giants defensive line. And there's an impression out there that the Giants have this outstanding front seven, and they have four outstanding pieces in their front seven. They, of course, have Dexter Lawrence. They have the two edge guys in Burns and Thibodeau. They have Bobby Okereke. But there are questions about the guys that are going to line up, with their hands in the ground on both sides of Dexter, in three-man line, and next to him in a two-man line as well. And, you're talking about, Rakeem Nunez-Roches. Nacho's a good veteran player. Didn't have a great year for the Giants last year. But the Giants, after that, I'm kind of discounting Jordan Phillips, because I don't know what the deal is with Jordan Phillips. He's been working with the third team. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think he's going to be included in my next 53-man roster projection. He's been working with the third team, and I haven't seen him make a play yet. So I'm not sure what the deal is there, but you've got a collection of undrafted free agent players. You've got a collection of late round draft picks. So the guys that are going to line up in their hand with their hands in the ground next to Dexter. And by the way, when Dexter needs a rest, which is going to happen, that's a big question for me. I'm just curious, who, if anybody, you really like out of that group.
Well, I'm going to move Nacho aside because Nacho, he has his role, right?
Right.
Regarding Dexter Lawrence's backup, I think that's going to be Jordan Riley. Everything suggests it. Dexter Lawrence, he's been practicing the last couple of days, but he hasn't been in full team periods. Every time he's not there, and when he was out with the illness, it was Jordan Riley filling in. And you've seen Jordan Riley, Ed. The guy is absolutely massive. It looks like he also really got into a different shape this time, and it looks very good and very tight. So I think Jordan Riley solidifies himself on the roster behind Dexter Lawrence.
It's funny. Can I, before you move on from Riley, I just wanted to interject. In my story this morning at Big Blue View, that is one of the things that Nacho talked about. He said that he felt like Jordan Riley didn't understand last year the work that needed to be put in, the physical condition that somebody really needed to be in, to play down after down at the NFL level. And he said that he felt like he's seen a difference in Riley this year. So I just wanted to interject that. We'll see if that pays any dividends.
And on to the other defensive players. Like Ryder Anderson has received a lot of snaps with the first team. I would say it's been up and down. He would have that inside shot to play next to Dexter Lawrence and Nacho in base personnel. I really like Elijah Chapman. The reps I've seen from him in third team, second team.
Right.
I think he's received few reps in first team so far, but it's been a little bit of a steady drumbeat, and we know his archetype. It's the type of archetype Shane Bowen and the New York Giants have been talking about for so long. Someone who's very quick off the snap, someone who could fire off the snap low, and someone with the upfield burst and the quickness to challenge angles and really defeat one block, because everybody's going to be focused in on Dexter Lawrence. I just don't know if Elijah Chapman can hold up against the run, and he still has kind of an upward climb to make this roster. So it's still wide open. I'm not discounting Boogie Basham. I'm not discounting DJ Davidson. I mean, Jordan Phillips, again, you brought him up. I haven't really seen much from him. Timmy Horn's another player. I think these practices and this preseason is going to be very important for who is going to make that roster spot. And if nobody really rises to the occasion, Ed, this could be a situation where after the third preseason game, upon final cuts, the Giants poach somebody through the waiver process and put him on this roster to play next to Dexter Lawrence, or at least give him an opportunity to earn some playing time next to Dexter Lawrence.
Absolutely. And, you also talked about the slot, and Drew Phillips has been getting more and more reps, in the slot. Isaiah Simmons is playing there some. He's also playing the inside linebacker, or money backer, if you want to call it that. It's very interesting. And I want to go a little further in talking about the cornerback stuff. You've been at a few practices, and I like Cordale Flott. He's a good kid. He's young. He's still got time to grow and develop. But the more I watch, the more I begin to wonder if, with the guys that are on the current roster, if Drew Phillips winds up inside and Nick McLeod winds up outside. I mean, again the other day, and it's not just matched up against Malik Neighbors. Cordale Flott got completely turned around in a goal line move, in a goal line one-on-one drill. He got completely turned around and was probably 3 yards away from Allen Robinson when Allen Robinson caught a touchdown pass the other day. Just Robinson's a veteran wide receiver, but after 10 years in the league, it was discouraging to watch Flott get burned so badly, on a play like that. So I'm beginning to wonder, if that's how they end up going, unless they make a move there. I'm thinking that Nick McLeod winds up starting on the outside.
I'm hoping Nick McLeod ends up starting on the outside if the Giants don't make a move, because Nick McLeod has, ever since he was poached off the Bills practice squad and added to this roster, he's made plays, and he's a core special teams player as well. But you watch him through camp. I mean, he's teaching Isaiah Simmons press technique from the slot. He seems like he has this, not just this chip on his shoulder, which he's shown through special teams drills with his battles with Wan'Dale Robinson in offense and then Tyrone Tracy Jr., but also just being somewhat of a player coach in certain areas of the game. So I've always respected Nick McLeod's game, but I don't know if he's going to thrive as an outside cornerback. It's just, I think the Giants really want Cordell Flott to seize that opportunity, but it has not looked good, frankly,
right
in camp. So the next man up would be would be Nick McLeod, but there's just not a lot of depth there, Ed. So
right
even if Nick McLeod ends up seizing that opportunity, Cordell Flott becomes your third guy and you can mix him in the dime package, I still think the Giants could use another body, another
absolutely
at corner.
Yeah.
David Long Jr. is another name I just wanted to bring up just because of one of the practices I was at. He was draped all over players in second team coverage. So I wanted to throw him out there because I know he's had some success on the outside and in the slot as well, and seems to be at least a competent enough player. But yeah, I'm concerned about the Giants cornerback room, as I'm sure a lot of Giant fans are.
Absolutely. Nick, let's flip over and talk about offensive matchups that you're interested in. I'm sure that a lot of that has to do with can the Giants block anybody, and can they keep Aiden Hutchinson off of Daniel Jones?
Yeah, it's going to really come down to the trenches there, and that's what we have to focus on. The first name, other than Aiden Hutchinson, is Aleem McNeil. Because when the Giants played Aleem McNeil, do you remember Aleem McNeil was just cooking? I think he had like 9 pressures against the Giants. The guy was absolutely everywhere. So I want someone to block him, and I'm really upset that it doesn't look like John Michael Schmitz is going to be available with his shoulder injury. He's out again. So that's very unfortunate because I would have loved to see him matched up against Aleem McNeil, who is an underrated football player. But then there's Aiden Hutchinson. Look, Aiden Hutchinson, he might align the left side. Get Andrew Thomas on him. Not too worried about that. But on the right side, how can Jermaine Illuminor hold up against them? From my vantage point, Jermaine Illuminor has looked good in most of these practices. He's going to lose his reps. He lost a bad one against Brian Burns in Friday's practice with the spin move. Brian Burns is an elite pass rusher, very quick. But overall, Jermaine Illuminor has looked good. But this is going to be a test. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a player that he hasn't seen that much of playing in the NFC, right? With Aiden Hutchinson, who's a very developed player at this point. So I want to see that matchup. And other than that, along the offensive line, I want to see them pick up twists and stunts and kind of work as a unit. Now, it's a little bit difficult because there are injuries and we don't have the full complement of starters out there. I'm guessing we're going to see some Greg Van Roten at center, which is interesting because he's only been here less than a week at this point, Ed. And then probably Austin Schlottman, who was puking his brains out in the last practice. So,
Austin Schlottman gets a shout out on the show, and that's what he gets it for, Nick. Oh man.
Well, I was about to say he's gonna be able to prove himself though, because Van Roten's not going to earn a full complement of snaps. JMS will likely not be there. So now you have Austin Schlottman, who's going to be going up against Aleem McNeil, who's going to be going up against Levi Ozarike and some of these other players on this Lions a defensive line. So if he can, show competent play as well, then the Giants might feel a little bit better about their backup center position, and maybe he'll have more of a direct path to the roster spot. And this is where it starts here, not just in training camp, but in these training camp joint practices against another team that you haven't seen all summer.
Yeah, let's talk about the Giants offensive line a little bit. John Michael Schmitz missed another practice today. That's 6 practices in a row. That means he's been out for a week. And I'm sorry, that's not good. All right. It's a shoulder. Brian Daboll says it's the same shoulder that it was a year ago that cost him 4 games. Although he says it's a different injury. But there were concerns about John Michael Schmitz when it came to play strength last year, and I think they showed up. And when you're dealing with a shoulder injury, that's going to happen. And it's apparent at this point that there's still a shoulder issue of some sort. And for me, that is very concerning. Are we going to see John Michael Schmitz take the step forward the Giants need him to take if he's missing time and if he's not playing, at full strength? I don't know how concerned you are about JMS. I'm just curious.
I'm always concerned when a young player misses time, training camp time, and there's really no direct timetable to when he can be back, right? So there's a little bit of concern there. I'm also looking at this Greg Van Roten signing. Look, even if JMS was 100% healthy, I think the New York Giants should have signed him because I think he's a valuable piece and I think he's a competent, functional player. But
go ahead.
I was just going to say this also could be some insurance for JMS and that shoulder. And we've seen this happen before with the New York Giants, very recent memory. We weren't really fully aware that Evan Neal was going to be out this long. I think we were told earlier in the spring that he's looking to be back by training camp. And now we are over a week into training camp and there's still no timetable for Evan Neal. And it's like, well, thankfully we have Jermaine Illuminor. Like, thankfully we had contingency plans in place just in case the worst case scenario happened, right? Well, now Greg Van Roten's addition could somewhat also be an insurance policy to JMS's shoulder injury. I'm hoping that's not the case, but I am glad that he's here nonetheless.
Well, I think, honestly, Greg Van Roten has been the starting center since he walked in with JMS sidelined. And he took a healthy number of reps the other day, and he's 34, and he knows his body, and you worry about him. You don't want him to overdo it. I'm sure that they'll monitor what he does, but Van Roten said that he's basically, although he's rarely played it, he said he's basically practiced as a center for the better part of the last 8 to 10 years. So he certainly doesn't look uncomfortable doing it. Honestly, I think this offensive line is trending toward Andrew Thomas at the left tackle, of course, Runyon at left guard. This is one of those moves. Like I said, when they moved Illuminor from left guard to right tackle, they didn't do that just to let him practice over there for a few days. They did that because that's where Jermaine Illuminor is going to play. And they're not going to move John Runyon back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. If they are looking at him right now at left guard, I'm pretty sure that's where he's going to play.
Yeah.
JMS is going to play center. I'm pretty sure that if JMS is healthy, Greg Van Roten is your starting right guard, and Austin or Aaron Stinney is your sixth offensive lineman. Josh Azudu's in that mix as well. So I'm pretty sure that's your starting line: Thomas, Runyon, Schmitz, Van Roten, Illuminor across, from left to right. The thing of it is, it would be nice to get that group some practice time together. So
it'd be excellent to get that group some practice time together.
And I'll be brutally honest with you. All the moves that Joe Shane made on the offensive line, I'm still concerned about the depth there. I mean, honestly, at this point, I would not be surprised if we don't see Evan Neal during training camp at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he begins the season on the physically unable to perform list, which would cost him, I'm not sure if it's 4 games or 6 games, the way the rule is right now, but
4 right now.
I think it's 4, but I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. I don't know what his physical condition is at this point, but Joe Shane telling us he's not far off doesn't really appear to be exactly the case. So I'm concerned about the last couple spots on this offensive line.
Same, Ed. And that poses a very, I would say, difficult question for the Giants offense. What do you do after those 4 games and he is fully healthy? And I know a lot of that will be contingent on how Jermaine Illuminor looks, but let's just say Jermaine Illuminor is a solid starting right tackle for you. What do the New York Giants do with Evan Neal at that point if he's back healthy?
I mean, my guess, to be honest with you, after missing all the practice time that he would have missed at that point, my guess would be that at best he becomes a swing tackle or a guy that they practice at all 3, at guard and tackle, and he becomes, basically another version of Josh Azudu.
That's unfortunate. 7th overall pick on that, but you're right. I mean, I'm imagining the Giants would have some packages where they would bring him in. They would use big offensive linemen, maybe in practice during the week, not necessarily working on development. You're working on preparing for your next opponent. That's what you are working on. And that's why it's so unfortunate that Evan Neal has this deck of cards dealt to him, because the Giants aren't going to be able to focus on his development and his slow ramp back into the lineup as much if you have pieces around him, because he hasn't shown competency through his first 2 years and he has been hampered by injuries. But yeah, this is almost a worst case scenario for the former 7th overall pick.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest issues with Evan Neal has been inability to practice consistently. And he's now missed all of the spring workouts. He's now missed the first chunk of training camp. Brian Daboll indicated, today that there's still didn't give a timeline as to when he might be back. So I wouldn't anticipate, suddenly seeing Evan Neal off the PUP list in the next day or two. Again, the young man has missed a lot of practice time, not to mention, how do you get better? How do you get better when you can't go out and work on your craft in the off season?
It's difficult, man. It's really hard to. You need to, and again, this is a kid who never really faced the type of professional or on-field adversity, right? Like he was a 5-star recruit, went to IMG Academy, and then went to Alabama, was a complete and utter stud. So it's a lot for him. It's a lot for him. But Giants, I'm glad at least they have contingency plans, Ed, thankfully.
Yeah, I think personally, I think they still, it's another position. You talked about cornerback. I think that's another position where I think they're going to have to be looking at the cuts at the end of the preseason.
I agree. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw it this morning, but I'm just going to toss this out there. I have on a few occasions mentioned the idea that the Giants could bring Justin Pugh in, as a backup. And I think the fact that they moved John Runyon to left guard, if he stays there, I think that kind of works against that idea, for the simple reason that Justin Pugh, I think, said on a podcast a couple of weeks ago that if he plays again, he wants to play left guard, period. He doesn't want to move around. He doesn't want to play the right side. He doesn't want to play tackle. He wants to play left guard. And the other thing that works against Justin Pugh coming back to the NFL, guys who are committed to being NFL players don't go on vacation with their families in the middle of August, which Justin Pugh was just on social media talking about going on vacation with his wife and his young son. So I'm not sure that Justin, as much as I love Justin, and who knows, it might still happen, but that didn't sound to me like a guy who's committed to finding an NFL team to play for.
I don't know about you, Ed, but I'm ready for Straight Off the Couch 2, the sequel.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it, but you wonder, like I said, I just wonder if he's actually committed to playing. So
no, I feel you.
But yeah, the Giants do need more depth on the offensive line. Are you at all? I thought I would be, but are you at all nervous about Daniel Jones with facing another team that may not take as good a care of him as the Giants defense has so far?
Not as much, just because I'm imagining Brian Daboll and the New York Giants staff, like, they're very clear with the Lions staff, who would then be very clear with their players. You are not touching our quarterback. And they're all going to have red jerseys on. So, like, this is a quarterback who tore his ACL last year. He's coming back. Right. And although he looks great right now, I'm sure that's been stressed heavily. But yeah, all it takes is one, hit or one player making a mistake. But that would cause an uproar.
Yeah.
It would be very,
and we've seen in a couple of these practices where there was a play, and I don't know if you were at this practice or not, but there was a play where the Giants tried to run a reverse, and Brian Burns was on that edge, and they tried to run a reverse, and he got into the backfield so quickly that Burns, Jones, and I think it was Wan'Dale Robinson, they were trying to give the reverse to, all sort of converged at the same time. And Jones took a hit. He didn't take a big hit, but he took a bump. And that stuff happens.
It's football.
So it is. It's football. Have you ever been to one of these joint practices, Nick?
No, I haven't, Ed. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good to see the Detroit Lions out there, and they're one of the more interesting teams, I think, to cover, with a lot of fun personality and a lot of skills. So I think it's going to be a good test for the Giants.
Yeah, it will absolutely be a good test. This is a team that is already established, which is amazing when you think about the Detroit Lions and where they were a few years ago, and And I know that people will get all worked up about, well, how could the Lions come from where they came from and the Giants are still feeling like they're treading water? But it'll be a good test for the Giants. I don't know if I'm going to get to sit in a Dan Campbell press conference, but if I get a chance, I'm going to try to do that.
What questions would you ask? You got some questions for Dan Campbell lined up?
Oh, I haven't at the moment, but Monday morning at 6:00, I have a 2.5-hour car ride. I'm sure I can come up with a couple.
Jeez, man, you drive all the way from, that's crazy, man.
I have a 2.5-hour ride. I'm sure I'll come up with a couple, but and I'll come up with a couple for Daboll as well. Can you believe, we're still early in training camp, but we've sort of hit, it's preseason week. These 2 joint practices, Nick, are the last 2 practices open to the public, with the exception, I think, the joint practice in Florham Park against the Jets. I think that's going to be open to the public as well, but that's not one that's in East Rutherford. So these are the last 2 practices at Quest that will be open to the public. Amazing that we're there already.
Yeah, time absolutely flew, and I'm glad that we'll have boots on the deck. We'll have 4 boots on the deck right there, Ed. Can we get credentialed for that one in Florham Park?
Yeah, I believe we can. I know. Yeah, I believe we can. So we'll try to be there as well. The joint practices are always interesting. Just, I don't know about you. I mean, they're kind of interesting for fans and they're nice to write about, but I don't want to see any fights. Although we'll probably see some pushing and shoving. You know what'll be interesting too, before we sign off? It will be interesting to see just how much these 2 teams, and I've been fascinated by the approach to the new kickoff rule and just how they practice it, how much they practice it. Do they do full teamwork? I'll be fascinated to see just how much time these 2 teams spend on it, going at each other with the new kickoff rule.
Michael Gobriel, special teams coordinator, as he said, he's like, man, I've come up with like 50 different kickoffs, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to implement any of them. Hopefully we get to see a couple, but I think a lot of people might be keeping that close to the vest, man.
Oh yeah. I think, I think what you'll see is pretty generic, but it's still, I don't know about you, but I love it. I love the fact that I don't care what rule they put in place, to be honest with you. I love the fact that they basically put the kickoff back in the game. It's a different format and all of that, but I hated it as a quote unquote dead play.
I agree. Yeah,
so
I absolutely agree.
I'm thrilled to see it back in the game in some format. All right, Nick, I will see you out at Quest on Monday morning, and we'll be there, as you said. We'll be there for both days, so looking forward to that. We'll have you guys covered from every angle you can think of, and you might even see our faces with a post practice report if we have time. So we'll see how that goes. All right, Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.